purchase agreement, usually a virtual power purchase agreement, which is essentially a financial hedge, contract for difference. And so they're usually anywhere from 10 to 15-year terms, where the corporate will kind of pay a per megawatt hour fee. And in exchange, each megawatt megawatt hour that's generated is sold into the grid at a specific settlement hub. And depending on whether that market price is above or below the actual PPA fee per megawatt hour that the corporate's paying, that each month the buyer either gets a check or has to write a check to true up the developer. Okay. And so most of what we do, we're a very heavy analytic shop, and a lot of it is looking at all the potential contracts that are in the market, the different PPA offers, and running pretty exhaustive forward forecasts and or using market curves to look at how we think those will perform. We also do backcast analysis and look at how the contracts would have performed, and just giving customers all the information they need to choose the right contract.
So it works. It's sort of like an electricity swaption or electricity swap.
Similar, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see. So a question for you. So suppose somebody wants to buy some amount of electricity, some contract. They say, I want, and they have some specifications. And they say, I want electricity I want to buy some electricity in X amount of units, and I want it on Monday through Saturday, because they have Saturday operations. They want Monday through Saturday. But their demand for Saturday is less than their demand during the week. And you have, and so they have this buy order. And then you have people who are suppliers. Does a purchaser, somebody wants to purchase, then it probably doesn't matter to them if it's completely filled, as long as it's mostly filled. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible to get the hedge perfect. Some buyers don't care as much about matching their load, or their consumption to the actual renewable generation, other than the total amount. But in terms of the aligning the two shapes, they aren't as concerned with that. Some are, and so we'll do work to try and match their load, in their shape each day over 24 hours with either one or multiple projects. We might put together a portfolio to more easily, or just to better match their load and reduce their exposure. So it just depends on the buyer's kind of preferences and what their goals are.
I see. Oh,
can you help me with what are we talking about? Trying to match what to what? I wasn't following that.
Every business has a load. So in terms of, that's just what they're pulling from the grid, their retail power essentially to power their operation. So their consumption, electricity consumption. And you can imagine if it's an office building, the shape, if you were to, sort of do just a bell curve or their daily distribution, it would, start very low, and then it would ramp up over the day and probably peak in the afternoon and then tail off again in the, afternoon and evening. And so if they're looking to try and buy renewable energy that aligns with that shape, they might, will try and find the right project that aligns with that. So in that case, solar might be a good option for them, because solar has this thing called the duck curve, where it produces, there's nothing, and then it produces, and then there's nothing again when it gets dark. So that might align well with them in their operations. Whereas if you have a data center, it might be a totally different story.
I see. So it's really a case of you have a typical person who's interested in buying, who doesn't really care about so much the timing of it, just the overall, but that's not all your customers. And and you do your best to match the more, say demanding, if that's the right word, demanding customer, challenging contract, whichever you want to say. That takes a little bit more work to match, but it's doable.
Hold on for a second. So let's say I'm a business that's, this New York-based hedge fund, let's say, right? So I've got a bunch of floors in an office building and a couple of buildings in New York City. Are you saying that some customers care? They're trying to claim to whoever they say this to that they're wonderfully green. They would actually care that they're buying the green power, and even though that might be out in Arizona or somewhere, they would care that it matched their usage pattern, rather than just saying we used, this month a certain amount of not awesome green power here in New York, but we put out into the grid near Arizona this green power, and so we're claiming that we're closer to carbon neutral than we would otherwise be. Why would they care about matching the hours?
Well, so a couple things. Number one, they're most likely going to want the generation to be closer, ideally even in the same market if they could, because then they can price hedge. So if they're paying, for their consumption, let's say they're paying $15 a megawatt hour or something. If they can get a renewable contract that's going to actually settle for basically the same amount or a little bit better, then they may actually make a little money on that hedge, or at least offset their brown power retail bill. So that's one.
Oh, so my fantasy that Starbucks, doesn't care at all, that they're going to buy green power where it's cheap to produce it and sell it to farmers who need lots of energy to move water around and whatever in this extremely sunny place. That's not generally how this works.
Well, no, that is, the price hedging strategy is pretty sophisticated, and most buyers don't do that. They're more interested in just matching it with their load more from a renewable perspective, and just kind of the claims that go along with that. They're not necessarily as concerned with the price hedge aspect, but some are. So for Starbucks, let's say, they may have they have hundreds, maybe even thousands, I don't know, stores in California, let's say, and so they may want to procure renewable energy in California to kind of offset their consumption there. So in that case, they may specifically want to tell that story, that they're they're kind of hedging their California consumption or load with renewables in the same state. But they don't.
So is that a story they like to tell their investors? Hey, we're not only green, but we're actually not going to end up paying much for being green because we're buying and selling in the same market. So we're going to end up, it's not going to end up costing us that much. That's a shareholder value kind of proposition, or why do they care?
Yeah, shareholders. They're just investors. They're pressuring all these companies to, go green as much as possible, and they all have sustainability goals now, and this is just one aspect of that. It's their what we call their scope 2 emissions, which is your electricity consumption and your carbon footprint based on that.
Cool. So Ted, feel free to continue asking questions, or I will.
I'm sorry, I missed that, Eric.
Feel free to continue asking questions, or if you're between questions, I'll ask one.
I think this makes sense. Yeah, but I mean, in a sense, in terms of the math, it doesn't really matter too much.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think, Eric, when we talked, we mentioned kind of what you're looking at maybe building in terms of kind of educational type software of some sort. What we struggle with quite a bit, just to kind of transition into that, is these companies I mentioned, they all have sustainability goals, and they have many different aspects to that. So if you can imagine, like since we're talking about Starbucks, they may want to procure some renewable energy for that side of it, but they may have goals around building efficiency. They may have goals around water use and recycling and waste and all these different things. All of that goes together into a comprehensive sustainability plan. And there's whole departments now that just manage that for these companies. Our piece of that is just the renewable energy slice. So that's primarily what we're concerned with. That being said, the renewable energy piece is maybe one of the most complex because of the complexity of these contracts, and the contracts are generally so long, 10 to 15 year terms, and they're so expensive. So much money is at stake that companies want to get it right, and they want to get in a good project. And so there's all kinds of education that needs to happen up front to just kind of educate them on some of the things we just talked about, educating them on just even like how electricity markets work. I mean, some of them know, some of them frankly don't. And so it's educating them on how that works, how the VPPAs, which are the type of contracts we offer, how those work. And we don't necessarily have a big staff to do that kind of advising work or consulting work. We have a team that definitely a sales team and a contracts team that focuses on, once the customers has kind of figured out they want to procure renewable energy, then we'll help find the best project for them. But before that, kind of deciding what their renewable goals should be, we're not really staffed to do that. There are all these kinds of advisor shops and consultant firms that do that work. And we've talked about, well, do we need to buy one of those? Do we need to create a team to do that? Just almost more as a lead gen function in order to kind of bring customers in. But it would be interesting to me to look at, can we have kind of a robo-advisor approach that is more educating them, helping them create their goals, that kind of thing, just through technology, kind of a robo-advisor versus having to staff a whole team to do that. So that's how I've been thinking about what you proposed or kind of talked to me about a week or two ago.
Yeah, so robo-advisor on the one hand is interesting. The idea that maybe using one of those conventional learning platforms where you can stick video and questions and all that kind of stuff up, and then a chatbot that encourages people to go through the process, and whether they get some kind of certificate from you or someone or us or someone when they get to a certain level of sophistication. How does the vision of basically it's courseware that the chatbot kind of teases, and maybe the tests are optionally, test questions are optionally able to be done over Facebook Messenger. The thing that's so exciting about Facebook Messenger for me is that it has this amazing open rate and amazing click-through rate relative to email. So in terms of, once we've discovered that the person is interested in becoming educated about this, the likelihood that you can keep them engaged is enormously high. So does exploring courseware development that would be where the person would be encouraged via a chatbot to remain engaged and get through the training, does that make sense? Or are you more interested in us thinking about this kind of robo-advisor direction?
Well, they're kind of, to me, they're similar. I mean, the idea that that you, so I think our gap right now is before that kind of time period, before just goal setting in general and helping them understand, should they be interested in renewable energy? If they are, how much might they need? And just kind of helping them craft that, their kind of profile in a way. And then getting that into our tool, and then we'll have humans that will take over and really help them refine their profile and their procurement strategy, and kind of really digging into it with them. But the initial part is kind of our big gap right now.
I'm wondering whether there's even something before the goal setting where I know enough to know that I ought to be in some way engaged. But I don't, but I need to, I'm going to be walking into a board of directors meeting or some meeting with very high level executives, and I want to make sure I appear unstumpable. Even though I've never done one of these deals, I want to make sure that any question I'm asked, I'm likely to be able to go into more detail than they want. So this kind of prep me to talk to other executives without embarrassing myself, which I assume is before goal setting level. Is that an interesting thing to do with educational set of videos, or does that make any sense?
Oh yeah. In my mind, that's definitely part of it. Is just help them understand the basics of electricity markets, how maybe some basic economic concepts. I think Ted mentioned Sharpe ratio earlier, but that kind of risk-adjusted value idea is definitely going to be applicable down the line. So, some basics like that, just kind of educating them on basics and helping them have a conversation with stakeholders, primarily their CFO, their Treasury Department, finance, because those people ultimately have to sign off on any deals. So, anything that can help them get them ramped up on that kind of stuff, in addition to the electricity markets, is good. You, if you're talking, Eric, you're muted.
Never had this happen before. I got an incoming call coming through Google Voice, but there wasn't an easy way to tell it to go away. There was no button to say, stop ringing my computer. So I just staring at this thing going, that's a mess. Okay, so, and so the idea of outsourcing some courseware development sounds like a plausible thing to consider.
Yeah. There's, I think I sent over different resources for you guys in terms of background. Our blog is probably good reading, just in terms of the basics of a VPPA and kind of what that looks like. There's also the Rocky Mountain Institute Business Renewable Center, it's called. I think I sent that link. You may have to sign up.
I see these two links here. I'm sorry, Ted, I didn't forward them to you. I apologize. Do you see that I just sent them in the Zoom chat? Are these the two links you mean, Andrew?
Yes. Yeah, let me see where Marketplace. Yeah, so the Reba one, the first one there, that one will have the most general information. So I don't know if they'll give you access. You'll have to sign up and see. I have access because our company does, and we're not necessarily affiliated with them, but kind of friendly with them. They're more or less a nonprofit. So I don't know. I'm sure eventually they give you access if you kind of explained it the right way. But they have a lot of content in there that could be good background and helpful stuff. They have a whole resource library, videos. They have a lot of what we're talking about. I don't know how widely it's used, primarily because their format is kind of old school and kind of hokey. But a lot of the same information is there. So if you get into their platform, you'll see they have this learn section. And if you go in there, like they've got a whole kind of buyer's roadmap, they call it, with all the steps along the procurement journey and how you kind of understand your energy.
So are you talking more about the CF apps or the Plexipark?
No, the CF apps.
CF apps. By the way, do you see this chat message, Ted?
I did.
Okay, good. I'm good. I mean, it's just a feature of Zoom there.
Yeah, and the other one, Plexipark, is kind of a European-based. I'm not sure if they're necessarily a direct competitor of ours. They seem more focused on the developer side of the equation. So the developers that are planning to build renewable projects, we certainly work with them as well, because they provide the inventory in our marketplace. But their educational things look somewhat geared for them, also a little bit for corporates. But I could imagine that we would have something like that. When you go to their site, their first link there is PPA Academies, and I don't know why they have 4. That seems strange, but I could see us having something like that where you can just kind of on demand learn about this whole world.
Now, you spoke in an earlier call about dividing up the world from the kind of, I guess, the mega enterprise at the level of a Microsoft or someone who would already know a lot about this and is trying to offset their cloud and other servers this way. And then the rungs below that, those enterprises. Do you mind going into that for a moment for us?
Yeah, so I mean, we kind of break our customers generally into 3 buckets. There's the big, huge companies, that the titans, as we call them, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Amazon, really big companies that have been procuring renewable energy for a while. Most of them have data centers, so they have huge consumption, and they have a lot of energy to buy and offset. They've been doing this a while. They're really experts. They don't need any of this. They frankly don't really need my company. They know what they're doing. They've kind of created the market, so they're good. We're friendly with them, and we work with them, and we help them a little bit here and there, and kind of provide some services. But in many respects, they're self-sufficient. It's the next step down that's our primary focus, kind of the tier 2 buyers that are still, Fortune 500, but and have significant electricity consumption and hence need renewable energy. Starbucks is a good example of that, where they may not have an enormous energy team, and so they need our services, and that's really where we focus right now.
So I'm imagining, are these tier 2 companies often like between Fortune 10 and Fortune 100, or how would I pick out these companies?
Yeah, I think Fortune 10 to 200, 250, somewhere in there. Because I think Starbucks they may not even be in the top 100. I'm not sure.
Great. Then you want to talk about any tiers below that, Andrew?
Yeah, so the next tier would kind of be smaller companies, still kind of an quote unquote enterprise, but they may not have investment grade credit. And so that's a challenge right now for us. There's not a lot we can do for them at the moment. We're working on some things to try and rectify that. But for right now, they don't have the credit to sign one of these contracts, because these contracts are 15 years. The investors just there's you can't, no one's going to sign a contract with you if they're not sure you're even going to exist in 15 years. So it's hard if you don't have investment grade credit to sign one of these contracts right now. We're trying to work on some credit solutions for those kinds of companies.
By the way, one of my dad's girlfriend's son is this kind of wildly high level executive, like way at the top of AIG.
Yeah.
If you ever wanted to have a conference call with a guy, you know, who's living and breathing insurance for a million years, I don't know whether William, it sounds like it's kind of, you know, a risk sharing kind of thing that they might want to be in on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. We definitely, so risk mitigation is another piece of the puzzle in terms of, offering customers for a premium, they can kind of fix their shape of their contract and just guarantee that they'll never lose money. But in exchange, they would give some of the upside up, to an insurance company. So there's definitely some folks that do that in the industry now. We kind of have been talking with them as well about.
No, I'm just wondering about if someone is below investment grade credit.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether, if you essentially an insurance enterprise could kind of gang a bunch of organizations together and say, okay, well, because then they're not all going to fail, right? So they're, together we can view this as investment grade, and therefore, as long, I don't know, that's just a
no, that's pretty similar to what we're working on. Yeah.
Though I'd have two concerns with that, though, is that one is, well, you pull together a bunch of below grade things. Kind of that's what the mortgage companies did in 2006. So you still have this default rate. So let's say you have an expected default rate of 20%. Okay, just make that up, right? And so one person, you don't do it with one company because you have one chance in 5, you're going to get nothing. Whereas if you pull it, then you say, okay, I'm going to get 80%. That's great. But then you're going to have some kind of,
please leave a message after the tone.
You're going to have some kind of premium involved, right? So
right.
Just the economics for these, for such a company is maybe not there, right?
Right.
Can
I jump? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, just in general, I think the companies that would be the backstop would have to be those that would take the energy regardless. So if the default happened, they could take over the PPA and they would have a use for that energy. So the backstop wouldn't be an insurance company, it would be like Google or someone, let's say.
Oh, wow. The idea that one of these titans who are not typically your clients in general, but they could get some brownie points for being the backstops for the tier 3. Do you call them tier 2 and tier 3? Are those the terms that you guys would use?
Yeah.
Okay, so this educational material, should we think of it as focused on mostly tier 3 or tier 2 and tier 3?
I would say mostly tier 3. I mean, that's, over the next, right now, that's not where we're focused, but over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll start to move, I think, down the tail and have to look at those companies and figure out, they want to buy, but we haven't figured out how to help them do that yet. So that could be the kind of the credit solutions we talked about. It could be shorter contracts. There's different things that may become a possibility. And so in those companies, because of their size, they're going to have even less knowledge about energy markets and how all this works. So I think they would have a bigger need for some kind of technological solution to help them get up to speed.
The upside of doing well with tier 3 for level 10, I'm assuming that's like huge, because there's almost 5,000 companies between Fortune 200 and Fortune 5,000, right? So is that essentially where, if you had a guess, if level 10 is wildly successful in the next 5 years, a huge amount of it will be in tier 3? Am I guessing correctly?
I think it will have to be. Yeah. That's really why the company was created, is try and get to that market.
Okay, so great. I hate doing things where I'm feeling like, oh, we're off in some irrelevant corner that has nothing to do with your corporate strategy. No, this is totally awesome. This is totally in the sweet spot of where you guys want to be.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm not educated enough to knock out a proposal to do this like today, but would you welcome a proposal in that area then when we are educated enough to write it?
Yeah, I think it's worth talking about.
So besides the resources you've already pointed us at, what other things do you think we would need to do to present you with a proposal that you would, welcome receiving?
Sorry, say that again.
Any other resources that you think we ought to be aware of? Maybe even a human. You might say, before you, write a proposal, talk to my opposite number in sales, who will have smart things to say about what should be in this somewhat tier 3 focused educational proposal. I mean,
Yeah.
is there someone else we should talk to in the industry, in your company? Like, how would we, besides reading the materials that you've already pointed us at and your blog, what else should we be doing so that we can put together a proposal that you'd be glad you got?
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone at the company here that necessarily would provide you a whole lot more at this point. Sales is pretty focused on trying to close deals this year, so they don't want to talk about anything else. Our marketing team is kind of running on fumes right now, just because our VP of marketing left recently, and our senior content person, who, if we wanted to move forward with something like this, she would definitely be involved. And I would have you talk to her now, but she's on maternity leave, so so that's probably not an option. But for now, I think just honestly that CF Apps link, the Business Renewable Center, REBA as it's called, that's the best kind of industry resource. So if you can get access to that, I think that will give you all the basics.
Hey, here's an idea. Maybe, should you choose to work with us on this, which I'm hoping you do, the kinds of sustainability consultants who we would interview and get great war stories from, and maybe include them on their own video of them telling these war stories. Like, here was a really challenging problem. Here's how we solved it. Maybe you could point us at some sustainability consultants who you would think should be featured interview subjects in some of the, and then by picking their brains, we'll create a better outline for what will be in this thing. And does that make any sense?
It's an interesting idea, yeah. In some respects, they're competitors. So we just have to be sensitive to how we approach that. Some of them are more friendly and are kind of frenemies.
You're saying they want to propose, they want to go around you. They want to, instead of going, here's what I'm thinking you're just saying, please correct me. Instead of saying, wow, we've got this, thing that's somewhat closer to a stock exchange with all the possible deals, these sustainability consultants, walk in or come back during a consulting project with just like one or a small handful of options that they think are already, kind of appropriate for the client's needs. And that's how they would be competitors.
Yeah, I mean, I think essentially what this tool would do is kind of automate with some of what they do. So I don't know how they'd view it, So that's yeah. I think that's just got to think about that a little bit more in terms of who would be right to approach.
Does anybody come to mind as someone worth whether I tell them that I'm talking to you, or I tell them that I'm at this point just
yeah, I mean, a couple shops that do this. There's one called Customer First Renewables. There's one called the other one, 3 Degrees. I think they're either based in Oregon or California. Those are two that come up a lot. There's a ton of others, but those are the kind of, I think they both kind of fall in the frenemy category. So I wouldn't want to like approach them and say, hey, you're doing anything on behalf of Level 10. You know, they would, I don't know how they'd feel about that. So, but they're kind of the type of entity that I was, you know, kind of talking about, and that we don't really provide those services today. So in some respects, we partner with them with the hope that in their goal setting with the customer, that client kind of decides, you know, that client, you know, hopefully decides to procure, and if so, go to Level 10. That's the hope.
So if I were to approach them with, I'm considering doing a blog, podcast in this area, under what circumstances would you be, you know, interested in being interviewed for it? But after all, it's true that I do not currently have a contract with Level 10. So not saying I have a contract is actually accurate. Is that like too sleazy to, or what your thought about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't mention Level 10 at all at this stage. So,
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny to me that this is like so poorly publicized. I mean, like, I hang around with people who, you know, at least claim to care deeply, you know, about the environment, and we're all like rah Greta, you know, like, you know, I mean, and I think if I ask them, do you know that, you know, Titan companies like Google are already, you know, buying, you know, green energy, this is like something they've been doing for years, and I think most of them would go like, no, I don't know anything about it. Like, it's kind of wildly not publicly visible, or am I missing something? Do you think people do know about this more than I am aware?
Well, industry people certainly, but beyond that, no, I don't think at all.
I wonder if there's an opportunity in that area. None's not coming to me quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is probably longer than what we said this meeting was going to be. Anybody have anything they want to say or ask? Ted, do you have a final question for this meeting?
I think you and I should talk about some things, and not take too much
Andrew,
time. You know, I think I understand sort of the situation. I mean, there's little things, you know, I had a little question for, but not more like, I don't think it really, I think it would get us off topic.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you guys, Eric, take a look at that stuff. If you have questions, you can email me or shoot me a text or something. And then, yeah, we'll chat in a few weeks or a month or whenever you guys are ready to get back together.
Beautiful. Is those two, that customerforestrenewables.com and 3degreesinc.com, are those the two you were just mentioning?
Did you just put some in the chat pod or something?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah, they're yep. So they do consulting and good. You can probably just poke around their blogs and learn quite a bit doing that as well.
Beautiful. Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay. Talk later.
Be in touch. Great. Ciao.